and get the book. And the last I remember, Helen was on her way to the parents of one of the people who was continuing to hold the meetings in Helen's town. Of course, her father is very upset, kicked her out, and now she was on her way to to the parents' home outside of the town or wherever they lived. And now we're on chapter 17. It's entitled Escape. A business meeting of the church will be held next Wednesday evening, announced the minister the first Sabbath that I attended church. All the members are urged to be present. I learned before long that my case was to be considered. What should they do with me? Should they give me employment somewhere, or should they send me off to school? Some members felt that it would be wrong to send me away to school without my father's consent. They thought it might change his heart if 2 or 3 members would drive home with me, oh dear, and talk the matter over with him. Perhaps he will even pay part of her expenses. Oh, they don't know her father, do they? But anyway, they were hoping that maybe he would even pay part of her school expenses. But the young minister from the tent meetings objected to this plan. I know her father, and I am sure this plan would be a mistake, he said. When they called me in and asked me what I thought, I agreed with him. Father always means what he says. He told me not to enter the yard again until I'd given up my religious ideas, I explained. I also told them that I was sure Father would object to my going to school, and I was glad if I got back home. No, excuse me. I was afraid if I got back home again, I should have to go through another dreadful experience. Some still insisted that the plan be carried out. So they appointed 4 members to drive home with me. The following day, we arrived at my home about 11 o'clock. Father saw the carriage drive into the yard, so he stepped out on the porch to greet his visitors. My heart throbbed harder and harder as we approached the house. We stopped near the gate. Father acted rather surprised when he saw who the visitors were. I could not keep from crying when I came near him. I wanted to greet him heartily, but he would not even shake hands with me. This hurt me so much that I almost cried aloud. Mother met us at the door. We clasped each other tightly and wept for a time before either of us spoke a word. She finally said, "I'm so glad you've come back, Helen." I then left her and hurried through the house to see all my brothers and sisters before Father came in. The few days I had been away seemed like a month. When I saw Leonard, I said, "I'm sure I've experienced a real conversion now." I did not see anything but peace filled my heart when I fully accepted Christ and began to serve him. "I wish I'd taken my stand with you," Leonard said, wiping his eyes. "It would be much nicer if I could be with you. Some day I will come and stand by you as I did during confirmation school." The visitors, Father, and all of us sat in the front room. Everyone sat and waited to see what would happen next. The 2 men talked about various things and tried to interest Father, but he was reluctant to talk. When they saw they were not getting very far with their visit, they mentioned their mission. Father listened for a minute, then stood up and said angrily, "You get out of this house. You are to blame for all the trouble that has come into our home. Now get out." Quickly leaving the house, they got into the buggy and seemed ready to drive away. I had to do or say something quickly. Tremblingly, I stepped close to Father and said, "Father, I had decided to go away to a Christian school, but these good folks brought me here to see if you will give your consent." Father responded in a loud voice, "Your place is here at home, provided you fall in line and give up your Adventist notions." "I would be glad to stay here, Father," I answered, "but I cannot give up this truth which has become dearer to me than life itself." Chasing me, he cried out, "No, 1,000 times no! You cannot stay here and be different from the rest of the family." Quickly, I got into the carriage. As we drove away, we could hear Father's frenzied voice. "I'm going to put you in the reform school. You fellows stop and put her off. If you don't, I will send the marshal after you." After the church members had heard the report of our experience at my home, they said, "What more do we want? Let us take up a collection and send her off to Union College." It was agreed that I should go to the Adventist school in Nebraska, and the collection was taken. Just as we were leaving the church, 2 men in a buggy drove up. One of the church members said to me, "I'm sure that is the marshal. If he wants to see you, he will have to see you at our house." Soon we were over the hills. The telephone was ringing as we entered the house. It was one of our friends calling. He said that the marshal and a relative of mine had arrived. We told these men that Helen was staying at our home, but that she was spending the night with you folks. They want to talk with her, so will you bring her right over?" "Yes, we will. We'll take Helen right over," they said. There were 2 good roads leading to our friend's home. These men waited a while, and when we did not arrive as soon as they thought we should, they decided they had better drive to where we were, as they feared I might get away. They took one road and we took the other, so we failed to meet. When they arrived at the house we had just left, they were told that we had driven over to a friend's house whence the telephone call had come. In disgust, they drove away, hearing the telephone ring and thinking that a neighbor who had been very sick might be trying to get a doctor. The woman took down the receiver and listened. She heard the marshal give someone at my hometown the following message: "We have tried to get her, but she seems to succeed in getting out of our way. We will not run after her any longer. We found out, however, that she is taking the early morning train and is leaving for some school in Nebraska. She will be through there about 7 in the morning. Take her off the train there." "Very well," was the reply on the other end of the line. I almost collapsed when I heard that they were planning to take me off the train, for I feared the worst was yet before me. I pulled my chair close to the stove. I was cold and tired. My tongue seemed to cling to the roof of my mouth. Burying my face in my hands, I was almost asleep when I heard one of my friends say, "Well, it is past midnight. We must act quickly. What shall we do to keep this girl from having any trouble when the train arrives at her hometown?" One of the men suggested that they hitch up the fastest team and take me 2 stations beyond my hometown and let me board the train there, and this plan was agreed upon. Seeing I was nearly worn out and not accustomed to traveling alone, one of the men thought it would help me to have someone go with me. Turning to his daughter, he said, "You've wanted to go to Lincoln to visit your sisters. Here is your chance. Can you be ready in 15 minutes to make the trip with Helen?" She was overjoyed. She and her mother rushed to her room. In a few minutes, the suitcase was packed. While the son got the team ready, her mother packed a lunch for both of us. It was a cold, stormy night, and we were chilled through by the time we reached the railway station. In 15 minutes, the train arrived. I did not relax, however, until we got past Sioux City. I felt sure that from there on I was not being followed. I was terrorized by Father's statement that he would put me in a reform school. In all the excitement, none of us stopped to think that Father did not have the authority to put me in reform school because of my religious convictions. The next morning, I got a glimpse of Union College and heard its bell ring out a welcome. I thought surely it will be wonderful to attend this school where everyone is a Christian. Of course, I did not have a cent of money with which to begin school. The money the friends in South Dakota had given me was only a few cents more than enough to pay my fare to Lincoln. I was not discouraged, however. I felt sure that God would provide. I stayed at a friend's home briefly. At Christmas time, the president of the college sent for me to come to his office. After a short visit, he took me to an adjoining room where the faculty was in session and asked me to tell something of my experience. I told a few of the most trying experiences as briefly as I could, and also of my desire to obtain an education so I could be of service to the Lord. As a result, during the vacation, a place was found where I could work for room and board. The faculty made arrangements for me to attend college the remainder of the year at no cost. And I just want to stop there. I know is a denominational school, but this is decades ago. And people, I've been a teacher also. These teachers were um, uh, concerned about their students and committed to providing for them in any way they could. And here we see that they found a place where she could work for room and board, and they made arrangements for her to attend college the remainder of the year at no cost. That's such a blessing. But going on, I thought that the few pieces of clothing I had received from different ones would enable me to attend school. One of the teachers helped me. Here we go again. And I know Mike Brown was a teacher too. And he helped his students. He told me of a few times. One of the teachers helped find inexpensive second-hand textbooks. I was never so happy as on the morning I began school. I thought that all the trials were past. Every faculty member appeared faultless to me. Even the students seemed to be almost perfect. School life promised to be wonderful. Daily I thanked God for the privilege of attending a Christian school. This peace did not last long, however. Satan had tried to discourage me in many ways before this, but had not succeeded. When he saw I was getting along so well, he evidently decided to bring his forces against me from another angle. He found someone in the Christian school through whom he could work. One day, as I sat in chapel, a note was handed me. The message it conveyed was anything but kind, reference being made to my poor clothing. I put the note in my book. I felt terribly hurt. I did not dare to look around to see if I could locate the writer. I did not say a word to anyone, but I kept the note. During much of the night I wept. I was homesick for my loved ones, and this unkind note weighed heavily upon me. I had a real battle to make myself return to school the next morning. I knew I did not have pretty silk and velvet dresses as some of the students had, but what I had was clean, so I had been content. I wished I had clothes from home, but wishing didn't help any. There was no chance of getting them. The next few days went smoothly again. I forgot my troubles and began to enjoy my schoolwork. But Satan was still on my track. About 2 weeks later, I received another note during chapel. It said, "Say, you Greenie, you had better get some different clothes if you want to attend college. Signed, Ha Ha." This note made me feel even worse than the first. I quickly put it in my book so that no one would see it. One good woman had given me a dark green skirt, and another had given me a blouse to match. These were the only clothes I had besides the few working clothes others had given me. Some of the girls had a change for each day of the week and 2 or 3 changes for Sabbath and evening entertainments. I became very much discouraged and conscious of my clothing. I thought it would be better to quit school and work for a while in order to get better clothes. It was hard to keep my mind on my subjects. Near noon, I had a study period, so I went back to my chapel seat where I had left some of my books. As I entered, I noticed 2 girls whispering and laughing. One of them said, "You could stand some new shoes, couldn't you?" Then they laughed. I sat down in my seat, but I could not study. My heart was pressing up into my throat, so I took my books and went home. Knowing my school program, the lady where I stayed inquired, "What's wrong, Helen? Why are you home at this hour?" "Nothing is wrong," I answered, and hurried to my room, where I changed my clothes and got ready for work. When I came out, she said, "Don't you have a class last period today?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Then why aren't you there?" In spite of the battle to cover my feelings, the tears came. This dear mother in Israel knew something was wrong, so she said, "Come over here, dear, and sit down beside me and tell me what's troubling you. Are you homesick? Are you discouraged about your schoolwork?" Upon her insistence, I knew what the trouble was. Oh, excuse me, upon her insistence to know what the trouble was, I showed her the notes. She was amazed and said, "I know this hurts you, Helen, but remember, the ones who wrote these notes are not Christians. No Christian student would treat a poor fellow student this way." I was quite surprised to hear her say that, for I had the idea that everyone in school was a genuine follower of Christ. In the evening, I told her that I had just about decided to stay out of school and earn some money for some new clothes. She said, "That will not do. You're going back to school in the morning," just like a mother would say. I decided to go back wearing the green dress for fear they would call. Oh, I'm sorry, my glasses didn't focus well. It reads, I dreaded to go back wearing that green dress for fear they would call me Greenie again. And my shoes were badly worn. My stockings were getting so bad that they would not stay up, no matter how much I mended them. So, all in all, I thought I had sufficient reason to stop attending school for a while. In the morning, I left for school at the regular hour. But instead of going to classes, I went to another friend's house. I told her my plans, but she too insisted I go back to school, which I did. One of the professors met me in the hall and asked me why I was not in my last class the day before or in my first class that morning. I told him I couldn't come. He said, I understand why you did not come. I'm glad you're back now. The woman you work for called and told me about the embarrassment you have passed through. The notes you received are also in our possession. We are sorry about this. Don't let it discourage you. We will check up on these unkind deeds. Our school will not tolerate such goings on. And I say amen to that. For then, I don't know what school is like now. It's been a long time since I've been in a schoolroom. Anyway, next chapter. In a dream one night, God spoke to one of the saintly mothers near the college. He showed her a girl in distress and poorly clad. She was so impressed with the dream that she awoke and couldn't sleep the rest of the night. During the day, that dream kept haunting her. At last, she telephoned my employer. I can see the girl yet, she said. I wonder if there could be someone in such need. I would surely help if I knew. That dream follows me no matter what I do. My employer told her in brief how the girl who was working for her was cast out of her home when she accepted the truth. She also told her of the notes I had received and that I was discouraged and wanted to stop school because of the lack of proper clothes. The woman, whom had never seen, and who had never seen me, replied, Send her down to me as soon as she is through with her work today. And so when I came home from school, I was told that a woman down the street had called and wished me, pardon me, to come see her. I had no idea what the stranger might want, but I went. When she came to the door, she exclaimed in surprise, Well, well, here's the very girl I saw in my dream last night. And she threw her arms around me and invited me in. After we were seated, she said, Let me see the soles of your shoes, dear. Now, let me see your stockings. I took off my shoes and let her see them. They were patched upon patched. Tears filled her eyes as she said, Well, I am so thankful that God directed me in a dream to help you. I see your worn shoes and stockings. I saw them in my dream, and your poor clothes. Come with me to my bedroom. She opened her wardrobe and gave me 2 changes of everything needed, from stockings to dresses. Then she said, Now we are going to the store. She took me to see the storekeeper and told him how God had directed her to help me. She also told him a bit about my needs. I have heard about a young lady at the college who was disowned by her parents when she accepted this truth, he said, but I do not know the girl. Well, this is the girl, she told him. Can you do anything for her? Well, surely I will, he answered in his friendly, kind way. He went off to the shelves, got me a fine pair of shoes and a pair of rubbers. I left the store feeling rich indeed. Unbeknown to me, the woman with whom I lived got in touch with the Dorcas Society during the week. The blessed Dorcas Society. I don't know about you, but I've worked many an hour there, and so much good has been done through that society. So, going on. Yes, I surely will. Let's see. Got in touch with the Dorcas Society the next Sunday. I was asked to meet with them, and they gave me a good coat and hat. The story of my experience began to spread among the church members, so various ones gave me articles of clothing. In a short time, I had more clothes than I had ever before owned. One of the students at school overheard someone telling my experience to a friend one day. This young student wrote home and told her parents about it and said she wished she could do something for the girl about whom she was writing. Her parents sent her $10 to use as she saw fit. As soon as she received it, she sat down and wrote the following words: Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment? Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Therefore, take no thought, saying, What shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or wherewithal shall we be clothed? But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Matthew 6:25-33. I see some of our regular members aren't with us this evening. Of course, we know the stumps are gone. But this is a good chapter, don't you think? It's a faith building chapter. It's a chapter of a young lady taking a stand and having basically no clothing, but how God has provided. So I wish the others were here, but nevertheless, I'm glad you're with us. Let's go on. With that beautiful text, she placed the $10 in an envelope on which she wrote my name. Underneath it were the words, God knew your needs, signed blank, uh, with Christian love. When I came home and found this letter on my table with the money, I felt sure an angel had visited me. I had been penniless for months. I had been very well provided with clothing, but I had no cash to buy stamps, pencils, paper, and other things, and every Sabbath I felt pained and embarrassed because I had no money to put in the offering. I at once paid $1 tithe and another dollar as a thank offering. School would close shortly, and I was casting about as to what I should do during the summer. I decided to enter the colporteur work and sell Daniel and the Revelation. As I began canvassing immediately after the close of school, I prayed God to help me exert the same courteous and uplifting influence on the people I should meet as did that friendly man who sold Father his first Adventist book, the very one I was now going to sell. Remember that book in the attic? I had worked hard all one day to finish canvassing a little town. I sold only one small book entitled Best Stories. I think I have that book on the bookshelf. But had not secured a single order for the large book. I finished the town about 4 o'clock with just enough money to purchase a ticket to the next place. I arrived there about 5 o'clock. This was quite a large city. I walked up to the main business section to get an idea where I wished to begin my work. I was somewhat uneasy, for I had had no success during the day. Now I was penniless in a strange city. The question kept going through my mind, where will you sleep tonight? And where will you get your supper and breakfast? Until I almost became frightened. I decided I would work hard until supper time, hoping I could sell enough small books to help me get a place to stay that night. I worked hard until 10 minutes to 6 and received nothing but the coldest treatment. I had not sold a single help, to say nothing of taking an order for the large book. It made me hungry to smell supper cooking in the different homes. Some of the women were really cross when they came to the door because they were interrupted so near their meal time. One lady who was especially cross asked me if I had a permit to sell the books in the city. I told her I had not secured any thus far because no one had asked me for one. My husband is on the police force. How would you like it if he stopped you? Then she slammed the door. I was almost too discouraged to go any farther, when in the next block I saw a bridge, spanning a running stream. I walked over and watched the water running along peacefully. Then I walked down the street about a block until I had the courage to begin again. I went back to where I left off, but again my courage sank. I knew people would be eating supper now, and I would be even less welcome than a few minutes before. So I thought I would pass the supper hour walking along the stream and return to my work after the people had eaten and were in a better mood. It seemed that my stomach had never been so empty as it was that night, and I didn't have a cent to purchase anything to eat. Suddenly, I heard the voices of some children. They were coming toward me along the stream. I saw they each had a pail, and as they came nearer, I could see that these pails were filled with strawberries. One little girl questioned, "Are you going to get strawberries too?" I said, "Maybe, if there are any left." The children all shouted, "Oh, there are a lot of them left, just a little way beyond that tall tree that is hanging over the water." Oh, I thanked them and walked toward the spot. What a feast I had! I ate all I wanted and thanked God for providing a delicious free supper for me. After washing my hands in the stream, I hurried back to put in a little more time at my work. I was hoping I could sell something to pay for a night's lodging. Near the bridge, I had to pass a large white house. As I looked, I saw a lady sitting alone on the porch, weeping. I felt impressed to stop and talk with her. Following my inclination, I started up the walk toward her house. She tried to brush aside her tears and straighten up. She seemed to be a fine woman, and I felt at home with her the minute I entered when she invited me in. She opened her heart and told me of losing her husband only 2 years before. Another deep sorrow had recently come to her. Her only daughter had died 2 weeks before I had come. She said, "As I saw you coming along the stream, I thought you walked so much like her. As you came closer, you looked so much like her that I just couldn't keep back the tears. I wished you would turn in so I could find out who you really were and where you lived." "I'm a stranger in the city," I told her, "and was just looking for a place to stay for the night." "What do you plan to do in town?" she asked, in a kind manner. Then I told her of my work selling Christian literature and my purpose to help people. The tears rolled down her cheeks all during the time I showed her the large book. She gave me an order for Daniel in the Revelation and for 4 best stories. That book, Best Stories, are stories about Jesus written in a young person's language, if it's the same best stories. Anyway, 4 best stories. I thanked her for the order and was getting ready to leave when she said, "I'm sure God sent you here. You have been a blessing to me. Won't you stay with me tonight?" We spent a happy evening together. Before we retired, I asked if she would object if I read a portion of God's Word. Then we would have prayer together, and she said, "I think that would be wonderful." So I read the Beatitudes, and part of Revelation 21, 1 through 7. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. I also read the words of the beautiful song, The Lord Knows Why, which I had written in the back of my Bible. This song had been a great comfort to me, and I hoped it would console her. I may not know the reason why dark clouds so often veil the sky, but though my sea be smooth or rough, the Lord knows why, and that's enough. I may not know why I am led so often in the paths I dread, but trusting Him, I'll press my way. The Lord knows why. I will obey. I may not know why death should come to the dear ones from my home, to take the dear ones from my home. But though mine eyes with tears be dim, the Lord knows why. I'll trust in Him. So, though I may not understand the leading of my Father's hand, I know to all He has the key. He understands each mystery. Oh, yes, He knows. The Lord knows why. These things are ordered from on high, and though dark clouds may hide the sun, the Lord knows why. His will be done. As I finished reading, she said, "Read it again." And I read it the second time. Then we knelt and had prayer. She took me to my room, and how good the clean bed looked to me. The next morning, as I walked up the street to begin my work, oh dear, I suddenly felt a strong hand take hold of my shoulder. I was rather startled as I looked up into the face of a big policeman. He was pleasant, however. He asked about my work, whereupon I turned right around and gave him a canvas for my book, but he did not appear much interested. After I finished, he asked, "Who gave you permission to sell books like that?" What would you say? She said, "The Lord said we should go to all the world and carry the gospel to the people," I told him. "This town is a part of this world, and I am endeavoring to fulfill the Lord's commandment. He stood silent, so I said, "Dear, she's bold." So I said, "Shall I read it to you?" "What would you read from?" he asked. "The Bible," I said. "All right, read it," he said. I quickly pulled out my Bible, which I always carried with me in my prospectus bag. I read the text that came to my mind first, Mark 16:15. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. He smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and said, You're all right. Put me down for a book in the leather binding. If anyone troubles you about a permit, call me. And he handed me his card and left. For 5 weeks I worked in that city. I had no more trouble about a permit. I stayed at my new friend's home the entire time at no cost. She had 6 young ladies rooming and boarding with her, so I helped her with the morning and evening work, and she appreciated this, and I was indeed grateful for her hospitality. Next chapter, the classroom lie. The first period of the new school year was over and examinations were going on. One morning in an oral test, the teacher directed a question to a young woman who sat right behind me. She did not answer it correctly, and so the teacher put the question to me. This delay had given me time to think about it, therefore I was able to answer it correctly. This angered the girl, who, in order to revenge herself, wrote a note and sent it to the teacher. In it, she accused me of cheating, claiming that I had read the answer from my textbook. When he dismissed the class, the teacher asked me to stay. He closed the door and then reprimanded me very severely. For a while I sat silent, wondering what I could have done. Finally, he said, Finally, I said, May I ask why I am being thus reproved? He then showed me the note. I said, I have no way to prove that I am not guilty of the accusation. I can only say I am innocent and ask you to take my word. He replied, I will try to find the writer of the note and let you face whoever it may be. Then he excused me. I felt terrible. It was such a shock that I cried all the way home. I told the lady for whom I worked about this humiliating experience, and she pleaded, Don't feel so bad about it, dear. Just keep your chin up. The one who told the lie will be revealed somehow. By the next morning, the teacher had compared the handwriting on the note with the essays he had on his desk and had found the writer. He asked us both to stay after class. I was surprised and grieved when I saw the pretty, well-dressed girl who was guilty. I could scarcely think she could be so unkind. The teacher asked me, Do you still maintain that you are not guilty of the charges of this note? I can truthfully say that I am not guilty, I said. Then he turned to the other girl and said, What made you say on the note that this student cheated? Did you see her? I did, she affirmed. Are you sure? The teacher asked again. I am sure. He excused her and then talked with me. I knew I could say no more than I had the day before, and there was no way to make him believe me any more than he believed the other girl. Therefore, I kept silent. It was a bitter trial for me to bear this reproach. It hung over me like a dark cloud for many days. I felt too mortified to face my teacher. I was horrified at the thought of what the rest of the faculty would think of me when they heard about it. One day I met the girl on the street alone, and I asked her why she had brought that false accusation against me. She retorted, It made me mad because you thought you were so smart and answered the question so quickly. You should have waited until I at least had a second chance. You didn't, so I thought I would make it bad for you. Well, I replied, will you make that statement in the presence of the teacher? She turned and said, If you tell this to the teacher, I will tell him you not only cheated, but you made up this lie. And then she hastened away, laughing. A few days later, I missed the girl from class. Questioning one of my friends from the dormitory, I learned that she was very ill and that the doctor had been to see her twice a day the last few days. Many thoughts went through my mind. I thought how terrible it would be if the girl should die with that lie unforgiven. I went to the greenhouse and bought a pretty little bouquet of flowers and sent them to her by her roommate. A few days later, I was handed an envelope containing a sincere apology for what she had done. The next morning, I went to my class. My teacher reached out and shook my hand. I humbly ask your forgiveness for not taking your word the other day, and for giving you such a stern reproof without being sure of my ground. Look at this note. The girl has written a confession which vindicates you. I'm sorry I caused you grief so unnecessarily. Then he added, this surely was an unfortunate experience, but don't be discouraged, for you are in the clear now. I would much rather have had your experience, even though it was hard, than that of the other student. Come, go for a walk with me, this girl told me as soon as she was strong enough to return to school. On the way, she asked, can you forgive me for this awful thing I did to you, Helen? I feel terribly uh, condemned when I received the flowers from you, and I saw my cruelty. I've already forgiven you, I said. I'm not holding anything against you. I'm the only child in my family and have always had everything I wanted, she said with tears. I was always told that I was smarter than the others and that I was all right no matter what I did, so I grew up to be very selfish. I never could stand to have anyone get ahead of me. If anyone did, I would make it difficult for that person. That is why I did this wicked thing to you. I'm grown up now and should know better, but it is terribly hard to correct lifelong habits. Sometimes I feel very bad because my parents let me grow up this way. Oh, I felt sorry for her, for she had much to endure in order to remove those selfish traits of character from her life. I was thankful that with all the difficulties I had suffered at home, our parents had taught us to give and take, to rejoice in others' victories, and to sympathize with them in their defeats. They also taught us that good looks are not the things that make us count in this world, but good behavior, discretion, sincerity, and honesty are the attributes that are pleasing to God and man. And that's the end of the chapter. We'll close there. But I can see we have just a tiny bit left. See, this much left on this side over here. So it may be we can start a new book next week, but I doubt it. I think it will take most of the time to finish our book, but probably we have 1 week left for this book in the attic. Okay, well, we are going to close with prayer. So if you're able, would you kneel with me, please? Dear Father, all of us, I am sure, are thankful our parents have taught us, and if we were in Christian schools, have been taught by our teachers, hopefully, to be good, honest, helpful people, Christian people in all that we do. And so I want to praise you, Father, for all that you've taught me through others as I was growing up. And I'm sure the rest feel the same way, Lord. You're so good to us. And thank you for this story this evening that has emphasized it. I know the world is way, way far from this attitude of helping others, being honest, being kind. And even Christian schools have bullying, Father. But help the teachers there and help the students there to strive to be like you, I pray, and help us each day to have that desire also. In Jesus' name, amen. And until we meet again, May God bless and keep you and be with you. And Lord willing, we'll be back here next Monday evening. Bye for now.